Okay, welcome to part 2. We were trying to have an understanding of what could cause security breaches, so we had a look at to the top level exercises or attempts or activities that are being performed by people out there. These are just some more explanations to the discussion that we just had on the last slide in the previous part. Okay, so what is a distributed denial of service? Here we will dictate it because we have done it already. It is a coordinated attempt to deny service by occupying a computer, fine, to perform large amount of unnecessary tasks. Fine. So as I mentioned earlier, you will be sending too much request, which is what a task for a particular server to respond. It is their task. So you will occupy that computer, that server, to perform a large amount of unnecessary tasks to make it busy. Fine, to make it busy, and this is so repeatedly performed that the server, it cannot even entertain any single connection request from any other. When it is engaged with an attacker machine, with the DOS source, fine, it is so engaged, it is so occupied with the attacker that it cannot even entertain one single connection for a legitimate user. So this is how bad it is. Now this can be performed using either logic attacks or flooding attacks. Flooding attacks we already mentioned, right? You flood the target machine in with repeated spam messages or spam requests. That is called flooding attack. Logic attacks are actually attacks where an attacker actually have a good understanding of the target machine, a system or an application, right? So it knows this is usually being performed by buffer overflow attacks. Buffer overflow attacks, buffer overflow. Okay. Now what it does is that if the attacker knows that buffer means that, for example, buffer is actually a memory being stored with each application, is used by each application to store its related data. Fine. Now if you as an attacker send a code or a particular set of data to this application such that it cannot handle it, what will it do? It will go out of memory. Fine, because it couldn't find any more data storage for a particular piece of data that the attacker is trying to input to it, right? So what will it do? It will go out of the memory. When it goes out of the memory, we say that it is the buffer has been overflowed, or the stack has been overflowed, the memory stack or the memory buffer, right? When it goes out of it goes out of control. So when it goes out of control, then out of control means that it cannot be functional anymore. Fine. So we said that this application, this system is not functional anymore, or it is not available anymore, so which means that it cannot provide its service anymore. Okay. Now we can do protection against the denial of service using, there are a number of tools. One is called the firewall. I know that you will know that what is a firewall. It is a network application, a security application. Fine. It can be installed on a network, on the entire network, or it can be installed on individual client machine or user machine, or which we also call hosts, right? To make sure that only authorized communication or only authorized network traffic could enter and leave that host or that network. Fine. So this is one way for protection. The other one is these two. These are cousins, or you can say siblings, right? So I will start with this one. IDS is actually intrusion detection system. Let's just say that your firewall is usually your first line of defense. It provides prevention from any unauthorized network traffic towards your organization or towards your personal computer host, right? What if, because I mentioned no firewall is perfect, no security solution is perfect, no application is perfect. Let's just say that it has been compromised by the attacker, right? Now you must have a second layer of defense. Remember security onion approach, you must have a second layer of defense. So the second layer of defense is usually after a firewall is your intrusion detection system, where it will, once an attacker get into your organization network, he must be doing something which is not usual, right? He must be doing something, because he will be aftering data, he will be downloading data, he will be stealing data, he will be performing in such a way which is not a normal behavior. Fine. So all these elements are then actually being analyzed, monitored by these solutions, intrusion detection systems. So what are intrusion detection systems? These are, again, they can be installed over a network, the entire network, to protect the entire network, or they can be installed on individual machines. And the objective is to monitor activities either on the given system or host or on the network, analyze if there are any threats related to this behavior. Fine. And if it does detect that yes, there is some kind of intrusion means something not normal, abnormal, what will it do? It does not take any action. It will report it to the administrator, security administrator, that there is something funny going on a particular system, on a particular network, right? So we call such kind of system as intrusion detection system. Intrusion detection system only monitor, analyze, and detect whether there is any threat or not, and then alarm or you notify or report to the administrator. Now, on the other hand, we have a more sophisticated tool, which is fundamentally an IDS, right? Intrusion prevention system. It exactly does the same job as the intrusion detection system or IDS, but the sophistication actually comes in its actions. It can also, take an action against by itself, right? By itself means that you must have programmed it properly. So it can take, an action after it has monitor, analyze, and detect a threat. It can actually respond to it. It can actually react to that event. Fine. So these are all examples. These are some tools that can be used to, for protection against the DOS. Attacks can be launched. DOS attacks can be launched using SYN flood. Remember TCP/SYN, TCP connection. When a TCP connection is established between point A and B, let's just say we done this thing in the network course. If A wants to connect to B using TCP protocol, the A will send a SYN request that I want to sync with you, I want to make a connection with you, right? And the response, B will do what? SYN A, that I am acknowledging your SYN. I want to, it's okay, I'm okay to be, to make a connection with you. And then finally, it says acknowledge, that I have received your acknowledgement. Once this is done, what happened is that there is a session, a TCP session or connection established between the two. This is called a TCP three-way handshake, 1, 2, 3-way handshake. Fine. Now, SYN flood is an example of the flooding attack in DOS. So what the attacker here he does is that he repeatedly sends the SYN attack. He has no desire to make a connection with the target, but his only plan or objective is to keep it busy. So it will always send this SYN, repeated SYN attacks. We call it the SYN flood towards this target, and in its response it will always be engaged or sending this response, SYN ACK, SYN ACK, SYN ACK, SYN ACK. Fine. This is called a SYN flood. Smurfing. What was smurfing? I totally I have been doing this for a very long time. Smurfing, yeah. So smurfing is actually an example of DDoS, distributed denial of service attack. So we have an attacker, fine, and this is a target. This is your target. This is an attacker. In a simple DOS attack, one attacker actually send these repeated requests, right? But in a DDoS or in a smurfing attack, what the attacker did is that it compromised a set of computers over the internet. Fine. They become their zombies or slaves or compromised systems in general. Let's just say 1, 2, 3, 4 systems. and then he uses these systems to send these repeated requests. Let's just say these SYN request or ICMP request, and to respond, this one is designed to respond to all SYN requests, so it will always respond to them, to individual, to all of them at the same time. So this is also a way to occupying someone's services over the internet, right? They will not be able to provide services to others. So this is known as a smurf attack. Fine, this one is more sophisticated. See, it's more first here, if you are sending, let's just say 10,000 messages or SYN request in 1 second, now you are sending how much? 40,000 in 1 second. So it's much more severe than a DOS attack. Okay, what is distributed denial of service attack? We already just mentioned that it overloads computer and prevents legitimate user from gaining access. The same objective as that of a DOS. More difficult to stop than a DOS attack because DDoS originate from different sources. We already established that one. Unacceptable browsing or unacceptable behavior, unacceptable usage of the system also leads to security breaches, right? So what should we have? As a protection mechanism, we should actually come up with a policy which we call acceptable usage policy or acceptable use policy. And this policy is actually being designed by an organization to aware their user not to perform activities that might lead to some kind of a compromise, some kind of a damage to an organization. So you could have an AUP for web browsing, you can have AUP for a particular server usage, you can have an AUP for email usage. Fine, and the objective is the same, that you must not be involved in activities that might lead to something funny. So unacceptable use can include what unauthorized users searching for file or storage directories. Sometimes when people are free, faculty for example or students are free in labs, what they do, they will surf over the network of the organization, which might not be allowed or which might not be desirable for organization, because you might end up with the something bad. I remember when we were doing masters, and we just concluded what is an AUP, and one of our friend actually started browsing over he was trying to perform some searching from his command line. He was very good, but at that time we were just learning information security, so he accidentally actually shut down a particular router, which was the main router to our college. So and then he ran away. The good thing was that he was hiding his IP by using virtualization softwares. Okay. User visiting prohibited website, as I mentioned the example of the torrents, right? We should not be using it. Fine, it is allowed, but you are prohibited to use it, because chances are that you might download some file that might be infected, and in turn you might infect the organization system or systems. Wiretapping is actually interception, either the phone line interceptions. This terminology actually comes from that conventional wiretapping. Okay, when you are taping or connecting wires or receivers to the line of a particular person that you are investigating, who is a suspect. Fine. Now it is also called interception of information. Okay. Now it comes in two forms. One is called active wiretapping, and the other is called passive wiretapping. Fine. So in both the main technique remain the same. You associate yourself, the attacker associate itself to the network communication line. Simple as that. But we will start with the passive one first, because it's much easier to understand. It's also, both of them are called sniffing, by the way. Fine. But this one is specially called eavesdropping. Eavesdropping or passive interception or passive sniffing or passive wiretapping is a wiretapping in which the attacker only listens to the communications, only monitor or listen to the communication. He does not actually actively involve in the communication. He does not insert his message into it, or he does not modify any message that he has intercepted. Fine. He only listens. and records. Then we have active. In active, active means that the attacker is actually participating on the line that he has intercepted, fine, that he is sniffing on. So he's not only eavesdropping, but he's also now active involved to use his messages, to insert his messages or modify the messages that is being transferred between 2 points. Now it again has two types, which is between the wire taping, between the line wiretapping, and piggyback entry wiretapping. Between the line wiretapping, the attacker only the attacker only insert his message when he sees that there is a pause between the two communication parties. So when he see or experience a pause, he insert his message. So between the line, fine, between the line. That is a piggyback. In the piggyback, he actually intercept the message, fine, then modifies it as per his desire, fine, as per his attack pattern, and then forward it to the other point B, fine. So he intercept the message either from point A and point B, modify it in his own way, and then retransmit it to the respective destination, fine. So these are examples of wiretapping and what it is. Backdoors, we already established what are backdoors. They are software that provide hidden access. They can either be just to cover up this one. Backdoor, we already know what is a backdoor. It is a software that is used to gain access later on when you sees that the actual login interface has been changed, or the actual login credential has been changed, fine. But they can be done by developers and vendors too. So let me give you an example. Microsoft, for example, in high level or in critical organizations such as military, fine, they tends not to use proprietary applications or operating systems within their infrastructure. For example, Microsoft. Why? Because you do not have access to the code. The military do not have access to the code to investigate first, because they have to investigate. They can only bring an application or a hardware to their infrastructure if it is trustworthy. Now these kind of application which has propriety, you do not have access to its code. You cannot properly assess whether it is if they might have installed some backdoors into it, fine. So they may be introduced by the developers or the vendors themselves. I remember some 10 years ago, I believe, RSA, which is a big name in the security industry, they were using these security devices like the one that is being given to you for your online banking by your bank, fine. It has a button. When you press it, it generates an one-time number for you or a one-time pin for you that you can enter for login and authentication. Okay, now that was based on a particular phenomena, RSA ID. It was known as RSA ID or something. And some researcher actually find out that this device is having a backdoor for the RSA. So RSA is actually also having a copy of any password or the key that are using by that device. So they also had a copy all the time for every authentication attempt that you will be performing. So at that time it was a big discussion, big bust on it. Attacker can use them to gain access, definitely, fine. This is mainly used by attackers, not by regular administrators. It's by law, it's not it's not allowed. I haven't seen any organization who allow their administrator to use such kind of backdoors. Okay, some other challenges that are associated, or some other activities or breaches that are associated to information security. Number one is the spam. Spam, what is spam? Spam is a message, an unsolicited message or unwanted message. It does not do any harm to you, but it will occupy your storage, it will keep you busy, fine. Reading it, they are unwanted messages actually, fine. So you might have seen spam folder in your inbox or in your Gmail account, which actually the Gmail server is designed in such a way that it has a spam filter, so it automatically filters it out for you. But then again, not every message is filtered. There might be some which may go through. Spam is also spam messages, but this is usually done through emails. Spam is usually done through emails, unwanted emails. Spam is actually also a spam, but it is these unwanted messages are actually being communicated over instant messaging services such as WhatsApp or IMO or Facebook Messenger or BlackBerry Messenger, things like that. These are instant messaging application or services, even by SMS. Fine. So if someone is sending unwanted messages or instant messaging services, we call it a spam. We call that spam as a spam. Cookies, chocolate chips cookies, not those cookies. These cookies are actually being used by your web browser for user experience, so that the user do not provide his preferences or username password again and again. Fine. All these information are stored by your browser in a cookie, and then when you access a particular page on a particular server, it will be accessing your cookie, and based on the information within the cookie, you will be provided the respective details. So it is mainly used for user experience. But the problem is that it might contain, not now but back in the day, it was used to store username and password, so that you do not provide username and password again and again when you are visiting from one page to another on a website. These days it usually contains some specific session related information, not session IDs, because usually session IDs are also used for hijacking, right? So it's not that much of a concern these days, but it is right for organization who have not managed the cookies, because cookies being generated by the server and then transferred to your browser, okay, and it's stored there. So their web application might not be managing cookies appropriately, so it might be a problem for you. Hoaxes or hawks, again, these are emails or messages. They again are not harmful. They do not infect your system or do anything harm to corruption to your system or informations, but they actually are used for blackmailing or for creating panic. So this is a good example. You must have a look at this one. Assassin contract. I think it was somewhere in 2014 or somewhere. So people are receiving an email from a person who claims to be an assassin, right? So the story is that you will receive an email from a person who is claiming to be a professional killer, and he will be telling you that I have been given this much amount to kill you, but I have been constantly monitoring you for over a period of 1 month or 1 week, and I find you very innocent person or a nice person, so I have changed my mind to not kill you, but instead you should give me this much amount, otherwise if you do not give it to me, I will kill you. So it is used for blackmailing. If the person is not blackmailed, he might be definitely coming to if the email or the hoax is generated in such a way that it seems a bit serious, people might getting in panic. Fine. So these are also some challenges that are associated, and there are plenty of examples. You can search hoaxes example, and you will see different examples of what a hoax is. Let me know if you understand it or there is still confusion. Okay, again, this is we have already established what are threats and vulnerabilities. Fine. But to introduce risk, the term risk, we should also be looking at it in the context of threats and vulnerabilities. So a vulnerability is what? A weakness in the system, right? Go with me, okay? Stay with me. So this is how you should be understanding what risks are. A vulnerability is a weakness in a system. Now, if there is a vulnerability, chances are that you might be experiencing experienced by a harmful event, right? That is what? A threat. And now a threat always take advantage of a weakness. If there is no weakness, you are good. Fine, because attacks are usually made if there are any weakness in the system. Fine. So vulnerabilities, they lead to threats. If you have vulnerability, there is a threat waiting for you. Fine. If you have a threat which is an harmful event or a potential harmful event, chances are that it will do some damage to you. It may do some damage to you. Now these are all maybes: potential, probable. So there is always uncertainty in these two. Fine. They may not actually happen, but as an organization, you must, as I mentioned in the beginning, you must continuously, the IS team, the information security team, must continuously analyze the risk associated with your systems. So what are the risks? Risk is the potential damage, the consequence, the harm, the actual harm, not the actual harm, the harm, the potential harm that may be caused by a threat. This is by a threat. Fine. What is a threat? It is a potential harmful event that might exploit a vulnerability. So vulnerabilities are always there. So this is a reality. Fine. When you are doing risk management, you start with vulnerabilities. If you have vulnerabilities, then you have to understand if are there any threats that might exploit these vulnerabilities. If there are any threats, then you should be analyzing what could be the consequence, what could be the damage that it might be doing to our objectives, business objectives. So threats exploits vulnerabilities which create risks or damages for organization. Now we can never eliminate a risk completely. There will always be a risk. As I mentioned previously, you can only reduce it just by driving on a road, right? So if you are going on a road, driving on a road, there is a chance that you might be hit by another car. That is a threat, right? Or if you are driving too fast, you might get into an accident. You might lose control of your car. So driving too fast is what? A threat to you, right? A threat. Now, or accident, sorry. Driving too fast is a weakness. The threat is what? Get into an accident. You might get into an accident. That is a threat, right? A harmful event. Now the consequence of an accident would be what? Loss of life, definitely loss of damage to your car. So that is the risk associated with it. So we can only we can never eliminate a risk, the driving risk, for example, the accident risk, because it's not just us driving slow. There might be some crazy person behind us or coming from the other side in the roundabout, right, hitting us. So we can only reduce it by taking our respective measures, security measures. So we can only minimize the impact of the threats, which is the risks, right? We can reduce the number of vulnerabilities by constantly looking at discovering these vulnerabilities and covering them up through programming, through implementation, through user awareness. Minimizing threats and reducing vulnerabilities lessens the overall risk. So definitely, if you reduce the risk, you reduce the threats. If you reduce the threat, you reduce the risk. Threats, risk, and vulnerabilities negatively impact or negatively affect the CIA triad, the CIA objectives. We already know that. No rocket science. Okay. Some common threats that are out there these days. Malicious software are there for sure. Viruses are there. Worms are there. Trojans are there. Right? Rootkits are there. Spywares are there. Then we have hardware and software failures because of bad programming, because of bad implementation. Your hardware and software may crash, you may fail, which may result in other damages. Internal attacker, some person within an organization, insider. This is also known as the insider. Might be having a grudge with you, with the head of the department, with other employee, with the CEO, and he might want to take revenge, for example. So or he might be not having any issues with the company, but there might be another company or another external person who will be persuading him for some money, for some reward, and then he might be exchanging information of the organization. So that is your internal attacker who is always there. Equipment theft, it happens all the time. Personally, in personal day-to-day life, there are mobile snatchers. People steal these things, right? Yeah. Then we have external attackers, the external hackers out there. You have natural disasters, which is the most unpredictable or uncontrolled events out there. That is also very crucial for an organization to what do you call it, to prepare themselves for natural disasters. Otherwise, if they hit them hard, chances are that they will go out of business. If we look at to COVID here, right, it's just a single virus, a simple small microscopic virus, but look what it has done to businesses. Industrial espionage is always there, fine, because of the competition out there. We have terrorism now. People are I will skip this one. I don't know why, but anyhow, there are some websites, for example, that are now hiring terrorists for training, for activities over the internet. I would not tell which websites. You might end up in one of them then, and I might be losing a good student. Okay, moving on. Threats types. Generally threats type. There are plenty of threats. We have been through some of them in the previous slides, but if we have to categorize them based on their objectives, how can we categorize them? So definitely they will be damaging what? The CIA. So we can categorize them based on. So disclosure threats are all those threats that will leak your information, that will disclose your information to someone who is not unauthorized. So it is related to the confidentiality. Then we have the alteration threats. Alteration means modification. If you modify some information or some systems in an unauthorized fashion, then we are doing alteration, right, or a modification of the system or information. So this is related to the integrity part. So any unauthorized changes that may be done by a particular threat out there, for example, a virus. When it affects your system, it corrupts your system. It corrupts your information. Right? A denial or destruction. Fine. Some attacks, they will not just deny a service, but will actually physically destruct. I still remember very vividly when I was doing my undergrad studies, my bachelor study. At that time, people do not have. I'm not that old, but I come from a country where technology actually reaches us very late. So people used to go to internet cafes for to browse over the internet, to do some chatting. They will only go there for chatting, or maybe some printing some assignments, right? So this is what the internet cafes were developed at that time for. Fine. Now I remember one of my roommates, because I was there in living in a hostel, and we saw him coming to the coming to the room with all sweat and very nervous and very afraid. So we asked him what happened. We gave him a glass of water. It was not cold water, hot water, because we were our cooler at that time, water cooler at that time, was not working functional. It was not functional. Anyhow, we gave him a glass of water. He got a little relax, calm down, because he find himself in a place where he has the friends. And then he said that he was chatting to one of his friends, in double quotation, and a friend that he just made on Yahoo Messenger. I don't know whether you remember Yahoo Messenger, but Yahoo Messenger was a messenger. It was just like your WhatsApp. So you would have the Yahoo application, messenger application, in which you will invite someone to be a friend of yours, and then you will start talking to them rubbish, start rubbish, here and there, just to pass some time. Anyhow, one of his friend in his Yahoo Messenger sent him, which was just, he became his friend just in a day ago. He sent him a file to, download a file, and it has my picture in there. That shows where we have been. He was talking about some pictures that he has taken with his family on a trip to Malaysia. I still remember it very vividly. So when he opened the file was corrupt. He was he tried the file too many times, right, to see. He was curious about the pictures. So he tried to open the file, but there was always an error that this file cannot be displayed. But all of a sudden he realized that there is smoke actually coming out of the CPU, the big tower of the machine, the computer, the desktop machine. Usually the desktop machine comes with this tower. One, you have a screen, and then you have a tower kind of thing which has all these computation, RAM, your hard disk, your CD drive, your processor in it. And he said that I saw smoke coming out of that machine, right, that tower. And then my system went off. So that was a physical destruction, which was actually later on we realized when we were learning information security in our masters. We discussed this with our teacher, and he said that sometimes the processor is given a task by an application which compels him to do processing with so high speed, or with so repetitions, such that it becomes extremely hot, and then this thing might have happened. So it actually can destruct your computational resources. Okay, I will come back to you in the third part. I have to pray my Dhuhr as well. So see you in the third part later, okay?